Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. My name is Chris Lim. I'm the Executive Director with the Contra Costa Resource Conservation District. Thank you all for joining us for our fourth stakeholder presentation. I think we have a good agenda for folks today, so thank you for joining. I do want to start off our day acknowledging that I'm currently on the unceded land of Bay Miwok, and I hope in continuing this work that we're carrying on traditions of sustainability and living in harmony with the land. So with that, thanks again for being here. Ben, next slide. Big shout out to our funders. I saw some of the folks here on our call already. So big shout out to the Coastal Conservancy, and our CNRA, and of course the California Department of Conservation for making all of this work possible and the plan possible. So just some quick welcomes from us. I already introduced myself. If folks want to introduce themselves, we'll start off with Ben.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Weiss. I'm the Ag Conservation Manager.
How about Courtney and Jennifer?
Hi, this is Courtney from Alameda County Resource Conservation District.
And hi, this is Jennifer from Alameda County Resource Conservation District.
And looping back to Catherine, I see you now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. I'm working on getting my screen to reflect that I'm sitting here. But yeah, good morning, everyone. Catherine Boxer from the Alameda County Resource Conservation District. Welcome, and we look forward to an interesting and interactive discussion with you all today.
Great, and another shout out to Carol Rice, who's also on the call, our consultant for this project. And yeah, please introduce yourselves in the chat and also let us know which watersheds you're coming from today. And just to go over some Zoom pieces, I know we've been on Zoom for what seems like too long, but we are recording this. Please keep yourself muted if you're not talking. We also will pause for questions, but please raise your hands. You can also put questions in the chat and we'll get to those as we can. And if in the off case that we're not able to get to them, we'll follow up with an email with folks. So thank you. And then just quickly, I'm going to go over the agenda for today. So we're going to talk about the submission process and give examples of how folks can submit their particular projects or collaborations into the potential RPP. And then we're also going to go over the projects that we got on our Jamboard, if folks remember putting their projects into that. So we'll kind of make sure that we're hearing folks properly on what those were, some of the locations of those projects. And we're also going to focus a little bit on what project types and the locations that we're sort of missing and where we could potentially be asking if folks have any other contacts or any ideas for folks who might have projects in those areas. And then towards the end, we'll have time for breakout groups and for people to talk amongst themselves on potential collaborations. And then also have time at the end to do sort of a parking lot and just some more general conversation amongst folks. And that should take us through this meeting. And I will hand it off now to Ben, so thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming again. So yeah, my name is Ben Weiss. I'm the Ag Conservation Manager here again at Contra Costa RCD. And I'm going to walk you first through kind of a little demonstration of what we're looking to, what information we're trying to get out of these regional priority project forms that we're asking you to fill out. We hope that this is a useful exercise for you and seeing what we're looking for, hearing maybe why we're asking certain questions and not others, so that you can get these projects into us and we can roll them into the RPP. So just a few notes of clarification before we really get going though. Again, this regional priority plan is a planning document. We do not have funding to implement these projects. We wish we did, but what we're using this planning document is to show both in the Alameda and Contra Costa region that, you know, these are the projects that we identified through this collaborative process, and these are the strategies and the goals that we want to hit as we're looking to reduce wildfire risk here in Alameda and Contra Costa. So we want this planning document to be supportive of projects you may have ongoing or projects that you may be doing in the next couple of years. It's in that way, it's kind of similar to a community wildfire prevention. The Diablo Fire Safe Council has been the planning lead effort for that. I will say that we are going to talk about some projects today. And if you do have projects, we'll get a little bit more into what we're looking to include specifically within the regional priority plan. But we may point some of those projects towards Cheryl Miller and the Diablo Fire Safe Council for potential inclusion within the CWPP. Just because it's pretty much every project is going to have a house in one or both documents. We just want to make sure that we're getting the right things in the right places. All right. So again, we've talked about the submission form before. It's available as a Google form on our regional planning website that's got all our GIS information on that too. We're happy to send that to you if you have trouble accessing it. Likewise, we can send you a fillable PDF. I actually went through the PDF myself in creating this presentation, so we've done it a few times. We're happy to send that and have you send it back to us. We've got a soft deadline here of March 15th. That'll give us enough time to kind of work with you, ask a few more questions, maybe identify some other priorities that are going to come out of that project, and all that. We're hoping to wrap things up ideally here before the start of summer on this planning effort, so that's why we've got this March 15th deadline. So please try to get them in beforehand. All right, so today, as mentioned, I want to kind of walk you through what this submission form looks like. We've made it look good for a presentation here, but we're asking just 10 questions that we've got, go through each of these, and then we're going to use kind of 2 example projects that you know, are being thrown around. So the first, we're looking at to give a scale and a sense of what we're looking for in these projects. We're looking for everything. So I've got on the left here, you can read all about, a prescribed burn association. For those of you that don't know what those are, they're pretty expansive. They cover county or counties. They've got a lot of people involved in working with them. These are our aspirational projects that, may be 2 or 3 years away from actually fully being built out, but there's still something we want to do. We want to foster that regional collaboration. But then on the other side, we're also looking for those smaller projects that may be a little easier to implement or things you already have ongoing. So I'll be walking through a project that both Alameda and Contra Costa RCD are both actually actively doing already, which is working to increase grazing infrastructure for enhanced fuel management in our rangelands and in the wildland-urban interface. So the first question is pretty straightforward, just asking for some basic contact information so that we can get in touch with you and ask a few questions. And then likewise, who is involved in these projects? I've listed a bunch of partners I know from CCRCD for the grazing that we work on. We work on a variety of public and private lands. Likewise, this prescribed burn association list is by no means exhaustive. This is more or less kind of what I could cobble together and make look nice on a slide. So if you're interested in the prescribed burn association, please do not feel slighted that you're not on this slide. Definitely reach out to us. I think it's something we're going to start to look into and potentially develop. But like I said, it's a couple years away still. So then question 1 is really just what is your project? Summarize the project for us as quickly as you can, and ideally a sentence, maybe 2 if you need it, and then what's going to happen on it. So ultimately the goal, right, of a prescribed burn association is we'd like to increase capacity somewhere in this county, be it at the RCD or potentially through the UC A&R system or UC Cooperative Extension, or maybe it's a whole other entity, or it's a Diablo Fire Safe Council, who knows, to basically act as a prescribed burn association in the model of other prescribed burn associations that are all over California now. They're community-based mutual aid networks for public and private landowners in an effort to get prescribed burning out of the landscape and kind of return to maybe some of the more historical fire conditions that existed before we all got here. And then on the other side, my grazing infrastructure project it's an on the ground project. So again, we're trying to show here that we're looking for these maybe more policy and capacity building projects that don't have the on the ground component, so to speak, or don't have a physical component, but we're also looking for those physical projects. We want any and everything we can to get into this regional priority plan. So the grazing project is more or less working with public and private landowners, and then likewise some of our federal partners to increase grazing infrastructure, to increase grazing on public lands and private lands throughout Alameda and Contra Costa counties. We're also interested in identifying what the primary fire hazard is or the vulnerable natural resource that we are trying to protect. So the Prescribed Burn Association, again, is ultimately looking to facilitate prescribed burning in the East Bay counties and provide support, training, and network, and get a network going of private and public land managers to work together. So the primary fire hazard here is just a general reduction in fuel loads, both in grassland ecosystems and forest ecosystems, and doing that in a way that's safe and effective. Likewise, on the grazing infrastructure piece, it's more or less the same, except for maybe a focus on fuel loading. But likewise, I didn't include it on this slide. This project, those projects often occur in places where threatened and endangered species also exist. So if we can better manage these rangelands for benefit of both livestock and for these species, we're protecting that natural resource while also reducing fuel loading in our rangelands in Alameda and Contra Costa County. Question 3 is asking for some basic location details. Really give us as much or as little as you can based on what we've got here. So for the Prescribed Burn Association, again, since it's more of a conceptual project, I envision it being kind of between both East Bay counties and Contra Costa and Alameda County. Land use type, it's going to cover potentially all these various land uses. I don't know the exact acreage out there. Apologies for not knowing that, but again, it's okay if you don't know that information. That's still a worthwhile project that we want to support and get within the regional priority plan. On the flip side, looking at the grazing infrastructure project, we've got about, I think it's 300,000 acres is what I looked at the other day in some of our ag reports between both Alameda and Contra Costa County. That's as it currently exists. We can certainly probably enhance resources within those rangelands and potentially get into rangelands that don't have those resources to support broader grazing where people want it. Likewise, location-wise, as I mentioned, there's threatened and endangered species in these rangelands that would benefit from these projects too. And then we are asking, and this is something that we will be sharing out with folks afterward, but if you do have a physical location, we would love to know where so that we can start to make project plans based on, or start to identify, I guess, gaps where our projects aren't currently happening. So this QR code and this link is included in the Google form up at the top, and I believe in the question, but I'm going to do a really quick demo here. It's pretty straightforward. This will take you to our Survey 123 website, where really we're just asking for you to input some sort of project location for where your project is going to potentially be. Likewise, just so that way we can cross-reference across a couple of forms here. We're asking for a quick project name, your project description, and the contact email. For those of you that haven't used Survey 123, it's a really quick and easy demo here for you. You can see this map here. Obviously, it's a little zoomed out, but you can click on this button in the bottom left corner. This will make the map larger, and then you can use the arrows to zoom in. So I'm going to highlight a project I know that is ongoing, that's coming up for the RCD this fall, I believe. So we're going to be doing some grazing improvements out here in Walnut Creek. So then up in the, I guess I should clarify, this layer that you are seeing, all these red areas, are the identified high fire severity areas across both Alameda and Contra Costa counties. So this is also going to help give you a sense of where these projects could be occurring and what resources are there to protect. So if you click up in the top right corner on this little polygon, that'll allow you then to drop a few points. So I'm going to say that we're going to do some general rangeland improvements in these areas. It doesn't have to be exact. We just want to get more or less a sense of where these projects are happening. So then I should be able to click out. My polygon is still there. Project name, Grazing Infrastructure Improvements. we want to improve. Everyone gets to watch me type, sorry. Grazing infrastructure, and then my contact email. So then all you have to do is hit submit. We've now got that, and then if you've got multiple projects, you can click this button here. It'll take you right back to that same form and submit another project in a potential another location. Really, the exercise here is we're trying to figure out, again, where our gaps are. Where aren't we seeing projects that need projects? And that'll be on us to reach out to those folks. So it'll really help us if you fill these out and let us know where we need to really hit the ground and start connecting with folks that maybe aren't at these meetings or haven't heard of what we're trying to do. So I'll go back to the presentation now. This next question in a couple paragraphs describe project details, including methods, expected outcomes, stakeholders. So really we're just whatever extra information you can give us about this project. What exactly does it entail? What are you hoping to do? Have you done these types of projects before? Have these projects been done elsewhere in the state that you've heard of? And maybe that's where you got the idea. That's all information that we are interested in collecting. So the Prescribed Burn Association, in order to get to a state where we have that association, it's going to be a lot of work sessions, probably similar to this, a lot of collaborative meetings, a lot of one-on-one meetings with folks to get them involved and on board. Maybe some educational components to get private landowners or homeowners associations or regions educated about what we're doing with the Prescribed Burn Association. Likewise, education for members of the Prescribed Burn Association. The outcomes is ultimately for us would be a creation of a Prescribed Burn Association. The stakeholders, I've got public and private landowners of open spaces, and then previous successes. There's a number of EBAs that have cropped up all over California that we would mostly look to them for lessons learned and how we could structure one to meet the needs here in Contra, Costa, and Alameda counties. Likewise, on the grazing infrastructure, our methods would be working ultimately with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resource Conservation Service, working with farmers through them to handle some of the planning and permitting on some of these rangeland projects in an effort to increase grazing and increase infrastructure out there. The stakeholders for that project are mostly going to be ranchers, public landowners, and some private landowners. And in terms of previous successes, I actually didn't check with Alameda County, but I know that in Contra Costa County, we've got 25 projects we've done since 2015. I'd imagine Alameda County probably has more. So that's why I said 50 plus. We've been doing this for some time. Another element that we want to try to collect and to expand these projects are what are the co-benefits of the project. There are certainly going to be a number. Feel free to include as many or as little as you can think of. We may be able to work with you, ask a couple of questions, figure out some other information that we're looking to get. So co-benefits can mean anything vaguely natural resource related, but then it could also have benefits outside of natural resources to things like public safety or increasing potential in egress and ingress routes up in these rangelands. So for the Prescribed Burn Association, I listed the co-benefits as you see here, more or less the same on the right, except for the right's a little more concrete of a project. And we know that we're managing these projects a lot for the benefit of the Alameda white snake, the California tiger salamander, the California red-legged frog, which are all threatened and endangered species, and then likewise other wildlife out in these rangelands. Question 6 is, what is your timeline on this? What do you think it's going to take to get this done? Do you have an estimate for money? Really, it's just trying to start to put pen to paper and figure out what this is going to do, what this project's going to be. And if you don't have an idea on that, that's perfectly okay. We are trying to facilitate maybe ways to answer these questions through these meetings. We'll talk about this a little bit in the breakout groups, but that's kind of what we want these meetings to be, a place for people to ask questions, learn about what other folks are doing, or you may be connecting with folks outside of Alameda and Contra Costa to see what they're doing here. That's what we did actually with this Prescribed Burn Association. We talked up with Yolo, our city in Yolo County, based on a grant that they more or less just put in. And we're able to figure out that for a Prescribed Burn Association, we're looking at a project startup of anywhere from 2 to 4 years before things are fully up and running. And then they have this estimate of $350,000, which is the grant they actually just put in, I believe, to fund that through I think, those first initial 5 years. Likewise, the cost of kind of maybe the annual maintenance for a staff member to lead that PBA. So it's okay if you don't have the exact, to the cent figure. Even just any type of ballpark, I think, is going to be helpful, because it'll further inform more other questions, right? It'll help us know, hey, we need a ton of funding to do this, and it'll help inform maybe potential grants down the road from folks outside of the Coastal Conservancy or the Coastal Conservancy itself too. Likewise, on the grazing infrastructure, these figures were more or less captured from our generalized planning and permitting process. So again, if you have that detail, it's great. Feel free to share it with us. If you don't have that detail, it's okay too. Even if it's just ballpark numbers, it's all useful information. It's more information that I don't know, so that's great. Likewise, we're curious to know if your project is in line with organizational mandates or policies, or supported in other planning documents that you may have at a county level, or maybe within your own organization's strategic planning. So for the Prescribed Burn Association, I'd say loosely mentioned, or maybe it's not loosely mentioned in our strategic plan, but I believe that our strategic plan supports this Prescribed Burn Association, and that we want to be more involved in these fire landscapes and working with public and private landowners to manage wildfire as best we can. Likewise, on the grazing infrastructure, that is in both RCD's strategic plans, is to work with public and private landowners to facilitate better grazing and protect natural resources up there. So we're looking for any supporting documents you may have, any organizational mandates that you may have, if you're a state agency or a local agency with that type of information, anything that's going to support your project. Likewise, do you have fire department or other stakeholder support for the project? Feel free to reach out to your local fire districts or your fire safe councils or other stakeholders that may be involved in this, just so that way we know who else is interested in this project and supportive of this project. I actually haven't done much talking about the Prescribed Burn Association. I'd say that we are at step 0.001, but I would say that across the state, there's different levels of support, and that part of the process of setting up that initial PBA is going to be working with these fire departments or fire districts to determine their support and work with them maybe to bring them over to supporting these types of projects. Likewise, on the grazing infrastructure, that's not something I've talked with the fire district about, but I'd like to think that they'd be supportive of anything that's going to reduce fuel loading up in these rangelands and reduce wildfire risks. So likewise, we have stakeholder support from that project on a number of public and private landowners that work with us on these projects, as well as support federally from funding all over Contra, Costa, and Alameda counties. Question: is this project consistent with the forest carbon plan? And is there a preference for projects that minimize greenhouse gas emissions? This was something that we found in looking at some other RPP documents that, and state agencies too, they want to make sure that the projects they're potentially funding are in line with the state's forest carbon plan, and likewise is also reducing greenhouse gas emissions if possible, or minimizing them. That mostly, I think, comes in other regions is to whether or not waste or debris created from this project, for instance, a chipping project or something, what's going to happen to those chips after? Are they going to be spread and used as mulch somewhere else, or are they going to be burned? The state wants to work to minimize these greenhouse gas emissions. So since this is a planning effort for the Prescribed Burn Association, we don't anticipate greenhouse gas emissions. It's probably going to be conducted over Zoom. Hopefully, when we get to it, we can do those meetings in person. But since we're just developing that, there isn't an actual project. Likewise, any of those emissions could be potentially offset by reduction of some of this fuel that's consumed in these prescribed burns that would be underway as they promote new growth in burned areas in grassland and in forested land. Likewise, it's similar on the grazing infrastructure that there are some greenhouse gas emissions, mostly from the use of mechanized equipment as we're looking to rehabilitate ponds or install livestock water systems or tanks or troughs. But that's potentially offset through increased grazing and promoting new growth annually. So the state just wants to know here that you're considering the project or considering the greenhouse gas emissions that could come from the project and how we'll work to minimize those. And this last question is probably the big one. What are the known or potential barriers to project implementation? We've got a couple listed there. And then are there other special skills, expertise, or equipment required to complete the project? So for the Prescribed Burn Association, the first barrier is probably going to be funding, both for whatever organizing agency tries to do this work. Likewise for participants, you know, people's time is valuable. You can't, it'd be nice if we could get everyone funded, and maybe that's something we go after, is trying to set up some sort of system like that. So that's an identified barrier. Likewise, there's some public opinion that probably needs to be addressed about prescribed burning, working to educate people on prescribed burning, all that good stuff. But ultimately, the project needs is capacity building. We need to find a place to do it. We need to work with them to support the creation of these prescribed burn associations and facilitate this cross-stakeholder collaboration. For the grazing infrastructure, some of the barriers that we find are typically access to grant funding or other cost share funding can be a little difficult to get. Even if you have that, there's still a lot of permitting, project planning, and implementation that needs to happen. And then in terms of generalized equipment, you know, construction grade, farmers, tractors, other equipment that we can use up in those range lands, and the landowners having that or not, and relying on other contractors. So by all means, feel free to throw the kitchen sink at these, because the other thing we're using specifically with question 10 is potential ways to, or potential new projects that are going to kind of come out of commonalities between all of these different projects. You know, you may need CEQA support. You know, we may identify that as a common project or a common barrier, and then look to develop a way to reduce that barrier as another project, or maybe other permitting help, or it may just be funding. So this will help us. Feel free to throw everything, and we'll try to identify some commonalities and then spin off into other potential projects that we can throw into this RPP. And with that, it is 10:30. We did want to give, I guess we just started, but we'll give everyone a break here just because we are going to go next into a quick discussion on some of the projects that we had from our last Jamboard, and then a quick breakout session, and then some parking lot time afterwards. So if we all want to come back here at 10:35, we can get started there and take a quick break. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you at 10:35. All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for that quick break here. I apologize for not answering questions right before that. I just saw the break slide and went right into it. So if you do have questions based on anything that I just said, we've got a few minutes here. If you want to raise your hand, we'll ask you to unmute and ask it. We'll spend, I'll say, probably the next maybe, let's cap it at about 10 minutes so that way we can get going if we need to. But you're also welcome to reach out to any of us either through our personal emails, at our work emails, so to speak, or the regional priority plan at ccrcd.org or regional priority plan at acrcd.org. So if you have any questions about the form that we just went through, feel free to raise your hand. That's down at the bottom in Zoom there, or unmute yourself and feel free to ask away. All right, give you another couple of seconds here. I'm not seeing anyone unmuting or raising your hand, so I'm assuming you're all experts now in the submission form. But again, feel free to reach out to us if you do have questions. We're happy to answer those.
So just so thorough, Ben. Thank you.
All right, with that, I will hand it off to Courtney to talk a little bit about kind of a summary of our last session where we went through the Jamboard exercise.
Hey everyone. Yeah, so for those of you who weren't able to make it to our last meeting, or if you just need a little refresh, we had about 44 participants at our last meeting and ended up coming up with about 40 project ideas. These were just things that we chatted about. These have not been submitted yet. So we're looking for people to champion some of these ideas and actually input one of the proposals that Ben just walked through to make it a little bit more formal. But going through those project ideas, there were some common types that emerged as being consistently important. And identifying those types is going to be an important part of the RPP. Having specific projects on the RPP is super helpful, but being within one of these project types is also going to be important for future funding. Some of those types were ecological consulting and best management practices. Fuel reduction projects were very common. Community wildfire mitigation projects were shown, and then I can't quite see it the far.
Grazing.
And grazing.
Sorry, let me think about restart it.
So we just want to highlight that some of those projects are not likely to make it into RPP because they fit better within a CWPP framework. So specifically individual home hardening projects, projects that don't focus on natural resources, and also Firewise, specific Firewise projects for communities may be a better fit with the CWPP plans, and it may be worth reaching out to Cheryl Miller at the Diablo Fire Safe Council for more information about how to be involved in the CWPP process.
And Cheryl Miller is in here with us right now. So Cheryl, if you want to introduce yourself, maybe drop your email in chat. If folks have some of those questions, they can get in contact with you.
Okay, just to kind of go over some of the specific projects that were discussed at the last meeting that fit under these types. So for the ecological consulting and best management practices, we saw suggestions for regional management standards that benefit native plants and benefit the ecosystem as a whole, while also reducing wildfire risk. And then having consultants or experts that are available to consult for those types of situations. We had a lot of fuel reduction and fire break suggestions, which was awesome to see very specific specifically located projects. Most of them that were suggested so far have been in western Contra Costa County, and a lot of them are smallish in scale, and that they are single jurisdiction or just one local area. And so we would like everybody to think maybe a little bit bigger, like how can we combine some of these fuel reduction and fire break projects, and how can we include other regions of the East Bay. And then another type was grazing management. So this came up several times in different forms. So having access to services, connecting people. So Graze Match is actually a great option for that. So making that more well-known, funding permanent or mobile water tanks or troughs and fencing as an option. And then also a regional grazing management plan would be really useful in both increasing the natural resources of the area and also reducing fuel loads. And then some other projects that came up that we just want to highlight as needing, that we think are really interesting projects but need champions to get them submitted into the RPP would be seed collection and post-fire replanting projects. I know there's going to be, or it's projected that there will be quite a shortfall of seedlings and things, native plant seedlings. So having some resources for that now will benefit us in the future. Permitting support, which we've talked about, and then capacity building, and also recognizing the benefits of ranches and farmers at the wildlife-urban interface and their roles in fuel reduction and buffering capacity.
Yeah, so again, just to highlight back to what some of our regional priorities are, these were kind of developed outside of our organization, but are ultimately what a regional priority plan is looking to have in it, right? So our high priority areas or considerations are looking for areas that contribute to wildfire risk adjacent to communities. We don't mean to imply that we are excluding anything in the built environment. We want to protect that built environment by also protecting the natural resources that are adjacent to it. We're also looking for big habitats that are at risk for wildfires. You know, some of those grassland ecosystems are home to many wildlife, so we want to make sure we're protecting those. We're also looking for at-risk areas with high habitat values that are, you know, sufficient riparian corridors, certainly threatened and endangered species habitats that may be at threat of catastrophic loss. Likewise, just general wildlife, we want to protect those too. We're also looking kind of after the fire, what can we do to support areas in need of restoration after fire or other mortality events, habitats that are at risk of conversion or development, and then the availability of adequate workforce and infrastructure to do this work. We want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up to have the workforce to do these important projects. So then specifically on some of these wildlife specific projects, you know, what species are in need of protection from fire? I'd say all of them do, but there are some that are going to be better suited to get out of an environment or escape, and some that won't. So we want to make sure that we're protecting those that can't. Likewise, we're looking for projects kind of more on the research track, maybe, trying to do some adaptive management and figure out better ways we can manage some of these resources, do some pre-post fire vegetation monitoring, see what's changing, all sorts of good research there. And then likewise looking for projects that address maybe some post-fire erosion in watersheds after the fact. You know, we want to protect our creeks and our streams, and we want to make sure that they are going to be healthy after a fire comes through. So what can we do to prevent the erosion that invariably comes with some of this fire in the later seasons? And then really quickly, we've got just a suite of maps we wanted to show you too. Again, this is just a quick plug for our both existing conditions map and then an analysis of those existing conditions map that we did are available at this link. I think someone will drop it in the chat here. We've plugged this a few times. This is a resource that's available to you. We want you to be able to go to your specific project site and see what's going on. Does it fall in a high fire severity area? Does it fall in a watershed of high need or high biodiversity score, stuff like that? And to give you a sense of a little bit of what we're looking for and how we use these maps. So each of these purple dots are projects that we took off of the Jamboard that have a physical on-the-ground implementation component, and we mapped them. So what you guys do as you're submitting these projects through that Survey 123 form will get connected on this map as well and start to populate, but we wanted to give a spatial sense of where our projects are at right now and where we are lacking projects. So I've also got here, the red area again is the potential high fire severity areas. So from this map, you can see that we've got a bunch of projects here in western Contra Costa County, a few in eastern Contra Costa County, but we are looking for projects down in Alameda County too, particularly South Alameda County, where there is potential high fire severity. You know, as we get more information, we'll start to plug these projects in and do some gap analysis and figure out who we need to be talking with. You know, I also see that we probably need to be reaching out to some folks here in northern Contra Costa County, certainly around the Mount Diablo area. So there's work to be done yet, and we want to know where we need to go because we don't know where. We have a vague idea of where we need to go, but it'll help us to figure out exactly who isn't at this table right now if we can start to focus on some specific regions. So then I'm just going to kind of go through a series of these maps to show again some of these layers and data that's available to you to show what you could be looking at as you're developing these projects. So this layer here is the CAL FIRE priority landscapes. I apologize, the legend here isn't telling me exactly what we do, but I would bet that most of that is lining up with probably the high fire severity areas. These are the areas CAL FIRE, I believe, is really interested in getting some projects in, or at least are on their radar. So anything in the San Leandro / Oakland Hills, probably going to be great. We want to get it included in here. Likewise, we've got this grazing map showing, you know, where are our grazed lands that we know about, where are grazed lands maybe that we need to do some investigative work, or work with people to see if we can facilitate grazing in some of those areas. You may find within your project area that there could be a grazing component and there isn't happening yet. So we'd love to make that readily available for you with these maps. Likewise, we've got here, this is an analysis that we did, I believe, on the watersheds with creeks and rivers in high fire severity areas. So again, we only have the one project here in the Upper Marsh Creek, which is, I believe, one of the important watersheds that doesn't have projects within it yet. Likewise, down in southern Alameda there, and apologies, I'm not familiar with the Alameda. So we're looking for projects there. Likewise, San Leandro Creek. So move on. And then this map is looking at the high fire severity areas, and then we did a quick analysis to kind of show what are the dominant vegetation types that are currently in those areas. I know when you get onto our ArcGIS website, you'll be able to zoom in and see this at far greater detail. But from kind of this, you know, call it the 30, 40,000 or probably 50,000 foot view, you can see that a lot of our high fire severity areas are lining up with areas of shrub ecosystem. I believe that's either hardwood woodland or baseous. I can't tell. So that's what's happening in that area. We want to find more projects there that are going to address maybe some of those specific vegetation types in these high fire severity areas. This is the last map we have today, which is biodiversity ranking correlated with some of these high fire severity areas. So the darker, more purple zone are the areas that have these higher biodiversity scores that we were able to pull from somewhere and show, you know, where are those overlapping with these high fire severity areas. Again, it's telling us a little bit of what we already know, but each of these maps has a little different flavor. So again, we're looking at Mount Diablo, we're looking at southern Alameda County, we're looking at the Oakland Hills and San Leandro. Likewise, we're looking up in the northeast bay in Pinole and in Richmond and in Wildcat Canyon, and Martinez. So all of this is available for you. Please feel free to check it out and get your projects in, and we can start to tease out where we need to be outreaching a little bit more and working to get folks from those project areas. So these next two slides just kind of summarize where we're seeing projects that we don't have yet. So our high priority locations where we don't have projects yet. Specifically, we're looking for kind of the area between Hayward and Pleasanton, between I-580 and I-680. It is a high fire severity zone. It is important threatened and endangered species habitat within that area. There's a lot of different jurisdictions, but we don't have projects there. So we want to make sure we're getting these jurisdictional projects. And even if your jurisdiction isn't listed here, we will still want your project because it's going to be of benefit to us all. Another area we looked at was south of Pleasanton and Livermore that we wanted to, again, southern Alameda County. We want to see projects in these important areas that have lots of natural resources and are potentially high fire severity areas. All right, and with that, we're going to move into our breakout groups here. For those of you that haven't done breakout groups, we'll start it in just a second, but ultimately what we wanted this time to be, so we've got 5 staff that are all going to lead one of these breakout rooms. We've got 5 topics here: grazing enhancement, capacity building, prescribed burn association creation, post-fire recovery, BMPs and resource guides, and research projects. These are projects areas that we're kind of lacking projects in. So what we want these breakout rooms to be is a way for you to maybe talk with some other folks that are interested in those projects and ask questions and start to develop projects ideas. Like I said, there's going to be a staff member in each room that'll help facilitate. So if you give us a few seconds, we'll get that all set up for you. But we're also going to let you self-select into these rooms. So in a second here, you're going to see the breakout rooms that you can choose. Feel free to join any of them. You can also leave at any time and go into another breakout room. By no means do you have to stick with one. We will be recording these breakout rooms just for our own information, so that way we can kind of capture and distill some of the feedback in there. But I believe I've covered that all. So
There was a question.
oh. Carol's question, I will pull it up. The room numbers are actually not the breakout room. As soon as I turn them on here, you should see in just a second. I just opened all the rooms, and they each have a name. So you can join whichever room you like. I think Catherine is gonna maybe hang around in this unassigned room. If there are other things you want to discuss, maybe that don't fit into one of these breakout rooms. So feel free to join those where you would like to go. We'll get started here in just a little bit. We're probably going to do this for about half an hour. Really, it's whatever you guys want to talk about. This is open to you. We want to make this valuable to you. And then we'll come back and we'll have just a quick wrap up, talk about some next steps, and then we'll have what we're calling the parking lot time, which we'll go over in just a little bit.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back. We hope that discussion in the breakout rooms was helpful and sort of get juices flowing and collaborations going. I know we had some nice discussion in our rooms. Did anybody want to share maybe a little bit about what happened in their breakout room, or a sort of quick debrief on some of the ideas or some of the highlights or challenges?
Looks like maybe the PBA group is still.
Are they still in their group?
Or maybe not.
I think everybody should be back. Hey, Canyon. How's it going?
Hello, I'm Canyon with Canyon Consulting and a representative of Indian Canyon Mutsun Band of Costa and Ohlone people. I joined the Prescribed Burn Association conversation, and I personally do have experience with the Prescribed Burn Association in the South Bay. And so it was a wonderful introduction conversation about the potential benefits of pursuing an association or even another conversation about a potential council and the importance of taking care of these spaces. And so I just want to remind people that as an Indigenous person, Indigenous communities are constantly forgotten about, and we are the original caretakers of these lands. Yes, a lot of history has transpired to bring in all of these community members and stakeholders who now call this place home, but please do not allow your short understanding of history and the poor information about us exclude us on an ongoing basis. So I want to remind you that we are still here and there's a lot of traditional ecological knowledge of the land. But prescribed bird associations are wonderful, highly recommend them, and hope that collaborations and strategies can occur going forward.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being here, Canyon. Thank you. Any other feedback or input from some of the other groups?
Hi there, this is Catherine Boxer. Jumped into a few of the different groups and would like to highlight in the grazing management how important it was emphasized that the use of grazing is in the scope of effective wildfire mitigation when you're talking about large areas of natural resources. So that I think is something important for us to keep in mind. And secondly, I wanted to throw out a question that we've had regarding individual projects that may be small to larger size and scale if folks are in need of significant assistance in the actual development of the project and techniques to implement, as well as developing costs and timelines. I guess most folks are comfortable, so that's good.
Yeah, it's sounding like it, Catherine. It looks like Alice, you have your hand up?
Yes, I totally agree with Canyon and what she said. And, you know, it's been a long time since we Indigenous people have had an option to have a seat at the table and to be able to tell our part of what's going on and how we feel. And these are steps in the right direction. And, you know, just coming here today and listening today, it almost feels like the culture burn thing. The prescribed burn is very important, but the culture burn aspect is still not um, big on anybody's priority. But we're going to make that happen. That's our goal with SIVA is to have those materials for our weavers, to make it a safer place, to get rid of invasive plants, to help with our food sovereignty, all that stuff. So, you know, again, agreeing totally with Canyon, and we're still here, and we're fighting back to ways that we had many years ago that was stewarding the land and doing the right things a long time ago. So hopefully, you know, we'll continue to get continue to have seats at tables where we can voice our opinions and voice our culture and our history. So again, thank you for letting us, you know, have a thought here today.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here, Alice, and thank you for that. We hope that folks continue to engage with us as well. Okay, any other pieces from the groups? Cheryl.
So I'm happy to share what our group talked about. We were in the capacity building piece, and we talked about the whole issue about capacity for developing and managing the projects, going beyond just small local projects to linking them regionally. That all of us see that lack of the capacity to just, if we're going after grants, to write the grants and then manage them. The whole sustainability and funding was a big issue. Alameda County Fire shared that they're looking to develop their own fuels crews, so to have a workforce and build that capacity. But the question is, if we get an initial grant, how do we continue to manage it on the long-term sustainable issue? And then we had several folks talk about, just getting the projects together, and then how do they manage everything from projects down in Sonol area on Sidbad Creek and Sidbad Canyon, and up in Richmond, dealing with some of the tree mortality issues, and the everything from the refineries to the private spaces. There's just such limited staff resources right now. That was a real common theme. We also had a real interesting one come up with Kensington and Berkeley, looking at a capacity building to do a public-private partnership along Cerritos Creek. So I think that those were some of the themes we talked about. Oh, and the dead, disease, and dying, like in the El Cerrito natural area, again, the whole issue of project development. And that one also brought out a big issue is the disposal, whether for those disease trees, we need to either burn them or compost them so that we don't keep spreading the pathogen. And that's something that's not very well attended to yet in our region is what is this, how can we cost effectively and be good stewards of the environment when it comes down to disposal? If we've done the projects, there's just no capacity yet for the biomass management. Sorry, I've used a lot of buzzwords, but those were some of the things we talked about.
No, you're good, Cheryl. Thank you. Okay. Anything from the other groups, or we are going to have some time after this. If folks just want to stay on the call and maybe talk a little bit more, we'll turn off the recording if that might help some other discussions. But please, these are the emails that you can reach us at. If you have any questions, please feel free. If you have any questions about the forms or any of that, I'm sure some of those will come up. We are planning to have our next meeting on March 16th. So we hope to see everyone there to continue the conversation. Also, if there's folks that, looking at some of those maps, if there's folks that about who we should invite to fill in some of those spaces that we have gaps for, please let us know, or if you want to reach out, that would be super helpful. But yeah, thank you all for being here. We'll go ahead and turn off the recording. If folks want to stay on, maybe some more thoughts have come up, or some more synergies may happen, more collaborations. So we'll keep it open for another 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how that goes. But yeah, thanks so much for being here. Hope everybody still stays safe. And we're here if you need us. Thank you for all your sort of local knowledge, and you all are the local experts on these. So thanks for input and feedback and help.